We begin tonight pretty far from St. Louis, in the northwest corner of Missouri near the town of Eagleville, not far from the Iowa border. Now, you wouldn't know it by just looking around, but this is a pretty popular spot in the springtime. People will come from all over to see, well, a remarkable show that's put on by some local residents. Singing, strutting, dancing, and this is one of the very few places you can see the prairie chickens do their thing. It's a limited engagement, and good seats, very hard to come by. This is a prairie chicken. Now, there was a time when that would have been obvious to just about anybody living in this part of the country, but for a couple of reasons we'll get into, they are now quite rare. But there's one spot in Missouri where they gather for their fascinating and entertaining annual mating ritual called booming. And some people will go to great lengths for a chance to see it. At a motel in Bethany, Missouri, the wake-up calls are coming at 4 a.m. And a small group gathers in the lobby, two couples from St. Louis and a man from Kansas City, supporters of the Nature Conservancy, which has invited them to what may well be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The chance to get a close-up look at booming prairie chickens. A caravan of cars heads north on Interstate 35 to the town of Eagleville, Missouri, then west a few miles to a place called Dunn Ranch, which is owned by the Nature Conservancy. A local resident, Bill Hiley, meets them here, and he will be their guide and sort of a color commentator for what they are about to see. You have to get there before the action starts so you don't disturb the birds, and that means hiking to the blind well before dawn. The blind is a cramped canvas-covered box on wheels, and they'll be sitting here for hours. No food, no facilities, no heat. It's 42 degrees this morning, but it might have been a lot colder, and they'd still have come.
You got to tell me what brings you out at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I'm trying to figure that out too. Oh, I just love to watch wildlife anytime, any place.
Right. That's probably true for all you guys, isn't it? You're all.
Yeah. I've been fascinated with prairie chickens since I saw an exhibit at the Science Center back in the early 60s, and I was fascinated with the booming grounds, and I didn't realize that they were so endangered at that point, and now the opportunity to see them in person, I'm just really excited.
And you got your camera with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing you either get or you don't. And these are people who love the outdoors. They support conservation. They travel and hike and take pictures. But no pictures yet. They're still waiting for enough light to see what they are already beginning to hear. The eerie, low-pitched, almost moaning sound of the male prairie chicken in search of a mate. In the first light, you begin to see them. The males are scooting along the ground, confronting each other.
And we're seeing a display of the male trying to attract the female.
They've been out here for a while before the females come out first.
Yes, they come out here half hour or so before the females get here. See, these males come from 2 and 3 miles around to this spot, and then the hens come in about a half hour later.
The booming grounds, this open grassy area, is called a lek, and the courtship season here is short, just a few weeks in March and April. That's when the male prairie chickens put on their show. But obviously, not for us.
You see a lot of different things that are really happening here. You see the males sparring with each other. They jump up in the air to attract attention to themselves, and then that agitates other males, and they want to fight back and determine dominance. And then when the display comes is when the airbag fills up, the orange airbag. They'll kind of duck their head, and their tail feathers will spread, and their wings will droop, and their little appendages will come up on the side of their head. And then they do their little dance with their feet, and that's supposed to be attractive to the female.
The sun is up and there are still no females here, but they're around somewhere and certainly hear what's going on. The cooing or booming sound comes from the males deflating air sacs. It's a sound that's hardly ever heard in Missouri anymore. In fact, Bill Hiley, who has lived here his whole life, never heard this growing up.
I think they were already gone, and that was in '48. I remember my granddad telling me about how the prairie chickens, he used to hear them drum, and then they just disappeared.
In fact, the population has been in decline for so long that hunting them was outlawed in the state 100 years ago. But hunting was just one issue. The real problem was habitat. These are prairie chickens. You get rid of the prairies, you'll get rid of the chickens. And this is one of the only places in Missouri where both are making a comeback.
When you top this hill up here, it just kind of opens up, and that's where our property starts. Over 200 years ago, this was an open prairie landscape.
Keith Kinney is a guy who knows prairies. Actually, he rehabilitates, restores, even recreates them. And he's the site manager at the Nature Conservancy's Dunn Ranch, and when you come to see the birds, you also come to see the reason the birds have returned to this spot in northwest Missouri.
If you look to your west, what you're looking at is...
This was once part of something called the Central Tallgrass Prairie Ecoregion, which stretched from what is now Indiana to eastern Nebraska. But white settlers began to move in. They plowed and they planted, and their farms replaced almost all the prairie. Almost all.
Of that whole region, that 1,000 acres is the largest unplowed block of prairie left anywhere in that region. Now we have a lot of what we call pocket prairies, small prairies, 20, 40 acres within that landscape, but as far as one big block, then this is it. That's why
the Nature Conservancy works with the conservation departments in Missouri and Iowa. And what they all own is just a patchwork, and they're working with local landowners to create a large unbroken prairie area that can be used for grazing and will support wildlife.
The strategy we're using now is we're actually doing a 2-year lease with a local farmer, having them farm it for 2 years to kill the fescue out, and then in the 3rd year we're coming in and planting prairie.
Kinney jokes that he spent half his life as a farmer killing the plants that he's now trying to bring back. And there is progress, parcel by parcel. In fact, they've got a big enough prairie area now that they've strung a high barbed wire fence because they hope to reintroduce bison here maybe in a year or 2. They would join the prairie chickens, although the flock's survival is still not certain.
The thing we don't know is we don't know how much habitat, open landscape you have to have for a viable chicken population. We don't know if this increase we've seen in the last 5 years is just a spike because of the habitat work we've done and then it's going to level off. We don't know if we're going to be able to keep enough genetic diversity in the flock over the long haul. There's just a lot of questions that we can't answer yet. It's going to take a lot of time and research to figure out.
The repopulation began north of here in Iowa when some Nebraska prairie chickens were brought in to the Iowa prairie land. But when it came time for booming, well, the prairie chickens chose this spot near Eagleville.
How did they know that this was the spot that the prairie chickens came?
You'll have to ask the Lord about that. I don't know.
I mean, after they were gone, they just appeared here suddenly.
Yes, they just appeared here.
And then it's just grown from there.
Yeah. And this is a spot that they like, something, I don't know, it's magnetic or whatever it is. It's something that we don't know anything about.
And finally, the real business of all this began. One female showed up to join the nearly 20 males and got a lot of attention from the boys. Although she didn't seem to show any interest, but like the other females who came on previous mornings, she would leave with her chosen mate and then go off to build her nest in taller grass to lay her eggs and hatch her chicks. Look out over this field for the first time and you don't see many trees, but prairie experts actually see too many out there. Non-native trees that they will continue to clear away. Because trees are places where prairie chicken predators roost, like owls and hawks. A harrier came by on this morning, but only managed to scatter the birds. It was out of our camera range, but Mike Case caught it on his. A prairie is a natural system of life and death, or at least it was, and bringing it back means giving the prairie chicken some advantages, taking out things like trees and non-native grasses, and bringing in seeds of native plants, and then watching for signs, like the return of the anthills, an indication that the prairie is taking hold. It is not easily brought back into existence or brought back into balance.
And I tell people, you know, it took us 200 years to wipe this prairie out, and we're not going to put it all back in a couple of years. So it's a slow process, but a very worthwhile process, and something you have to have a lot of patience with.
It will take patience, commitment, money, land, and the support of the kind of people who would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, hike into a field to spend hours in a little box. Because, for some reason, they think these birds make this world a little better. And a bit more entertaining.